Settle in. Find a position that feels natural without forcing anything. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Let the space around you belong to you for a moment. You don't have to fix anything right now. You're here to listen and let your brain do what it's already built to do. Tonight on Sleep Smarts, we're going to talk about something your mind is doing quietly, constantly, to take care of you. It's one of the most important, most misunderstood things your brain does to keep you sharp, focused, emotionally steady, and sane. And almost nobody is ever taught how it works. It's called synaptic pruning. The phrase sounds a little technical, maybe clinical, maybe even a tiny bit scary. Pruning, it sounds like cutting, sounds like losing, but the truth is softer than that, kinder, smarter. Your brain is not trying to erase you, it's trying to refine you. Synaptic pruning is the way your brain clears mental clutter so that what matters to you stays strong, fast, and available, and what doesn't quietly fades into the background where it stops draining your attention. Think of it as cognitive housekeeping, a clearing of the desk, a gentle "you don't need this anymore." If you've ever cleaned out a drawer and felt lighter afterward, you already understand the idea. A drawer full of everything is a drawer full of nothing useful. You open it, and it's just wires and receipts and batteries that may or may not work. You close it again because it's overwhelming. After you pull a few things out and let them go, suddenly the stuff you do need is right there. Easy, reachable, no friction. That's pruning. Your brain is that drawer. Inside your head are billions of neurons reaching toward each other, forming synapses, tiny connection points where signals jump from one cell to the next. Those connections are how thoughts happen, how you remember someone's voice, how you ride a bike, how you calm yourself down when you're stressed, how you know exactly where the light switch is in the dark without thinking. Every memory, every skill, every habit, every reflex lives in those connections. But here's the catch. Your brain doesn't just build connections. It massively overbuilds them. Especially in childhood, your brain creates far more synapses than you actually need long-term. Imagine planting a garden by tossing handfuls of seeds everywhere, letting everything sprout, and then later going back and saying, "Okay, these 5 plants are thriving. Let's keep those. The rest, we're going to trim them back so the good ones have space to breathe." That trimming phase, that is synaptic pruning. Your brain looks at all the connections you've formed and starts quietly asking, which of these are useful? Which of these are strong? Which of these are being used often, and which are just there, taking up space, burning energy, slowing down the signal? Because yes, unused connections slow you down. We like to imagine that more is always better. More information, more skills, more ideas, more tabs open. But your brain doesn't work best by hoarding. It works best by streamlining. When a connection is weak, or rarely used, or no longer helpful, pruning flags it as low priority and gradually lets it fade. The pathway becomes quieter. The signal gets rerouted through stronger, cleaner roads. And the result is that thought moves faster. Focus gets easier. You react with less hesitation. You stop wasting mental bandwidth on things that, honestly, are just noise. This is not you losing intelligence. This is you becoming efficient. That's one of the most important things to understand. Pruning is not brain damage. It's not decay. It's optimization. Your brain is doing what good editors do. Keep the core idea. Cut the filler. Say it cleaner. And this process is not rare. It's not some special emergency mode. It's always happening. Especially in certain windows of life. When you're very young, your brain goes on a building spree, creating a ridiculous overgrowth of synapses. Everything is input. Sounds, faces, textures, routines, emotional patterns. The rules of how the people around you react. Your brain doesn't know yet what will actually matter to you, so it keeps everything. You are pure absorption. Then, in late childhood, and especially adolescence, pruning ramps up. The brain says, "All right, you're using these pathways a lot. Let's strengthen them. These others, not so much. Let's let those go." This is one reason teenagers can feel intense, fast, and sometimes unstable. The wiring is literally being reorganized, refined, condensed, hardened. The system is being tuned. But here's something people don't always hear. Pruning does not just a teen brain story. Your brain continues to prune throughout your entire life. Into your 20s, into midlife, into later years. Your brain is constantly asking the same question. Who are you now? And what do you keep? That's what makes this so powerful. You are not stuck with the mental clutter you've accumulated. You are still being shaped. A lot of people carry around the quiet fear that this is just how my mind is. Too distracted, too anxious, too full, too heavy. But your brain is not a storage unit stuffed to the ceiling with boxes you're doomed to trip over forever. It is an active living system that is always reorganizing itself to serve who you're becoming. And synaptic pruning is one of the main tools it uses to do that. Let's slow down and sit with that for a second, because it's the heart of everything we're talking about tonight. Your brain lets go, on purpose, of what you don't reinforce, so that what you do reinforce can take the lead. That means your attention matters, your habits matter, what you repeatedly practice matters. If you keep returning to a skill, a language, a mindset, a way of speaking to yourself, a way of calming your body, that pathway strengthens. The synapses involved in that pattern are protected. They get insulated, myelinated, prioritized. Your brain says, this matters. We're keeping this faster. And if there are pathways you almost never use, ones you've outgrown, beliefs that don't match your life now, reactions that used to protect you and now just drain you, those start to fade, not overnight, not in a dramatic light, switch moment, more like a dimming. The signal weakens, the root goes soft, and that way of thinking becomes harder to access automatically. That's pruning. That's your mind quietly saying, we don't actually need to keep carrying this. Now here is where it gets really interesting and really calming. Most of this work happens when you're not even awake. While you are sleeping, especially in deep, high-quality sleep, your brain is not just resting, it's actively sorting, strengthening what you practiced and care about, clearing out what's just taking up space. It is literally cleaning up the network. Think of sleep not just as recovery, but as an overnight audit. Keep this, archive that, delete that. This is part of why you feel foggy, overloaded, scrambled when you don't sleep. The clutter stayed. So when you say, I can't think straight, sometimes what you really mean is my brain hasn't had time to prune. The beautiful part is, you don't have to force pruning to happen. Your brain is already doing it for you, but you can support it. You can create conditions that make it easier. You can stop working against it. Because here's the flip side. In the modern world, we are constantly feeding our brains input it will never use. Doom scrolling. Reading 40 things a day. Skimming arguments we don't even care about. Notifications pulling our attention in little micro. Sparks, all day long. Our brains weren't built for that constant background noise, and all that noise has a cost. When attention is fractured into 1,000 little unimportant things, it's harder for the brain to tell what should be preserved and what should be cleared. The signal gets muddy. Pruning is most effective when the system can tell what actually matters. So if your days are a blur of shallow, split focus, your brain is still going to prune. But it may not have a clean picture of what you actually want to keep. It's like trying to organize your closet while someone keeps tossing random clothes onto the floor. You'll still end up with piles. They just might not be the piles you would have chosen. That's why intentional attention matters, not rigid productivity, not hustling, not always be optimizing. Just choosing what you feed your mind, choosing what you rehearse, choosing what you let repeat, because repetition is how your brain decides. What is you? If you rehearse calm breathing before you answer a stressful message, and you do that often, your brain will start to wire that in as the default pattern. If you rehearse a tiny pause before you react defensively, and you stick with it, that becomes part of you. If you gently interrupt a thought like, I always mess this up, and replace it with, I'm still learning how to handle this, and you practice that day after day, that is what gets reinforced. That is what survives pruning. And the old loops, the automatic self-criticism, the spirals, the anxious rehearsal of worst-case outcomes, the hypervigilance that might have kept you safe once, but now just keeps you tense. Those can start to weaken, not because you're stronger, not because you're better, but because, neurologically, you're using them less. When you understand pruning, you start to understand something gentle and empowering. Change isn't about forcing yourself to become a different person overnight. It's about giving your brain repeated evidence of who you'd like to be, and then letting biology handle the cleanup. Your brain is not judging you. It's not moral. It's not saying this thought is good, that thought is bad. It's almost boringly practical. It's saying, you seem to use this pathway a lot. It'll protect it. Or, you don't really go down this path anymore. It'll reclaim that energy. That's it. That's the mechanism. And this is where mental clarity comes from. True clarity isn't having all the answers. It's not thinking positive all the time. Clarity is having less noise in the way. It's when your thoughts can travel along clean, reinforced, well-tuned pathways without interference from junk wiring that no longer serves you. In other words, less static, more signal. So as you rest here, listening, I want you to consider something soft. You don't have to memorize any of this. You don't have to analyze yourself or diagnose yourself. Just notice what this means. Your brain is already on your side. It has always been on your side. Even the patterns you don't like were, at some point, an attempt to protect you, to keep you efficient in the world you were in. And now, if those patterns are outdated, your brain is willing to let them go, if you stop feeding them and keep feeding what you'd rather become. You are allowed to outgrow your own wiring, and your brain will gladly help you do it. So let's go deeper into how this actually feels from the inside. Have you ever noticed that certain memories that used to sting don't hit you the same way anymore? Maybe there was a sentence someone said years ago, something sharp, something that sat in your chest like a splinter. For a long time you could replay it perfectly, word for word, tone and timing. You could feel it like it was happening again every time you thought of it. And then one day you try to recall it, and it's fuzzy. You can still remember the moment. Sort of, the outline. It mattered, but the colors have drained out of it a little. The edge is duller. It doesn't hijack your whole body anymore. That's pruning, too. We usually think of pruning in terms of skills and facts. What you practice stays, what you ignore fades. But it also happens emotionally. Your brain doesn't only wire patterns for motor skills or math problems. It wires reactions if a certain situation repeatedly triggered stress or anger or shame. Your nervous system built a fast path for that state. A reflex. An instant drop into this is not safe. That is still a synaptic pathway. But here is the grace in that. Emotional responses are also plastic, which means they're also prunable. If your life changes and you're no longer in the environment that taught you panic now, your brain can learn to stop defaulting to panic, the pathway that used to fire with full force every time you saw that look, or heard that sound, or felt that tone. That path can weaken over time if it's not constantly reinforced. This is one reason distance helps. Time helps. Healing helps. Not because you get over it, not because you stop caring, but because your brain is literally withdrawing resources from the emergency circuitry that doesn't apply anymore. You're not numb. You're not cold. You're not forgetting what happened. You're just not devoting processor power to keeping that alarm blaring at full volume. Your brain is saying, we're not living there anymore. This is important because a lot of people quietly judge themselves for still reacting or for not reacting anymore. You might feel frustrated that you still tense up over something that logically shouldn't bother you now. Or, on the flip side, you might feel guilty that something that once felt huge no longer floods you. As if caring less means you're less loyal to your past. But in both cases, what you're feeling is wiring. And wiring can change when a reaction still fires. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means that pathway is still alive, still strong, still tagged as important. It was built for a reason. You rehearsed it over and over, maybe without even wanting to, because your environment kept demanding it. And when a reaction doesn't fire the same way anymore, That doesn't mean the history disappeared. It means your nervous system has noticed this is not happening constantly anymore. So I don't need to keep this response on hair. Trigger. That right there is emotional pruning. It's your body choosing efficiency. Now here's the gentle twist. This same process is how you build emotional stability on purpose. Because pruning isn't only passive. You can guide it. Not in a forceful way. Not in a be better. Be calmer. Stop feeling that way. That doesn't work. That actually backfires because resistance is still rehearsal. If you spend all day thinking, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, your brain mostly hears panic, panic. You're lighting up the network you're trying to silence. Guiding pruning is quieter than that. It's more like this. When the old pathway lights up, that reflexive spike of defensiveness, dread, shame, guilt, you don't have to fight it. You just have to not feed it more than necessary. Feel it rise. Acknowledge it. Let it crest. Let it pass. And then, with as little drama as possible, practice a different follow. Up, a slow exhale, a re-centering phrase. A tiny physical reset. Unclench the jaw, loosen the shoulders, scan the belly. Drop it a little. That sounds almost insultingly small. But neurologically, it is not small at all. What you're doing in that moment is pairing an old trigger with a new pathway. You're laying parallel track. And if you keep doing that calmly, repetitively, consistently, your brain will start to protect that calmer pathway. It will start to prefer it. And the old reflex, the one that explodes and floods you and steals the rest of the day, will start to get less automatic, less urgent, less sticky. That is pruning as self-regulation. You're not forcing yourself not to feel. You're retraining what feeling rotes through. Your brain is watching you, kindly, constantly, neutrally. Oh, when this happens now, we don't spin outward for 4 hours. We breathe, we check in, we move, we continue, and over time, it stops prioritizing the 4-hour spiral, because from its point of view, that spiral is now inefficient, wasteful, low value. Your own calm becomes, in a very literal way, the thing that survives. That's the quiet superpower in all of this. You can't always choose what shows up in your mind, but you can choose what stays busy there. You can choose which pathways get rehearsal time, and rehearsal time is survival time, synaptically speaking. So you get to ask very gently, what do I want my brain to keep believing is important? Not in a what should I care about way. Should is noisy. Should is usually someone else's voice. I mean in a softer way. In a way that sounds like, what do I want to make easier for future me? Do you want it to be easier to catastrophize? Your brain can make that automatic. Do you want it to be easier to pause and respond with clarity? Your brain can make that automatic, too. Do you want it to be easier to spiral in self-criticism every time you make a small mistake? Or easier to say, I didn't love that, but we're learning, and move on with your nervous system intact? Either one can become the default. Either one can be reinforced. Your brain is not sentimental about which one it protects. It protects the one you practice. That sounds incredibly simple. Almost unfairly simple, but sit with it. That's the doorway. Because from here, we can talk about something that gets in the way. Mental clutter, not information clutter. Not I have too many passwords and appointments. I mean cognitive clutter, loops, replays, background tabs, constant low-grade self-monitoring. The kind of mental activity that never fully shuts off, the low hum. When you feel mentally crowded, it's almost never because you actually have too many thoughts. It's because too many thoughts have the same priority level. Think of it like a browser with 72 tabs open. It's not the number of tabs that's killing you. It's that any one of them can suddenly pop to the front screaming. A recipe from 3 days ago. A conversation from last week. A worry about something next month. A memory from 6 years ago that still has a pulse. They're all treated as equally urgent, so you're always braced. That bracing, over time, becomes a pathway. A practice state. Hypervigilance turns into your default baseline. Even when there is no specific threat present, you exist in constant low alert. And if your brain believes that low alert is the ordinary state, it will defend that state. It will prune in favor of keeping you on edge. Not because anxiety is who you are, but because anxiety is what's being kept active. This is where rest matters, not just sleep. Though sleep is huge, but actual downshifting while awake, undemanding quiet. The kind of moments where you're not scrolling, not absorbing, not planning, not fixing, just existing, letting the nervous system loosen. Those tiny windows of softness are not laziness or avoidance. They are biological signals. They tell your brain, we are not in danger right now. You don't have to budget all your energy to scanning. You can start loosening that network. You can start letting it go. When you never, ever downshift, your brain assumes vigilance must remain high. Value? So it keeps those pathways thick, fast, protected, which means they're the ones that survive pruning, which means even on days when you're technically fine, you don't feel fine. So one of the kindest things you can do for your future mind is give your current mind proof of safety. Calm is not an idea. Calm is evidence. When you create repeatable moments, tiny ones, even 60 seconds at a time, where your shoulders drop and your breathing slows and nothing bad happens, you're feeding data into the system. You're saying, this state is real. This state is allowed. This state is safe to keep. And if you give your brain that evidence often enough, it will keep it. It will strengthen that state. It will prune against the chronic tension that makes everything feel loud. This is why people sometimes say, I feel different lately, but I can't point to a single big change, just less static. That less static feeling is not imaginable. Level rebalancing. That is pruning. And this also explains why certain environments feel instantly overwhelming, while others feel instantly soothing. It's not only about preference, it's also about compatibility with your wiring. If you've built survival loops around scanning tone of voice, sudden movement, background noise, unpredictability, then crowded, chaotic environments are going to hammer those pathways. They'll light up loud. You'll feel flooded, even if nothing is wrong. Meanwhile, quiet, steady environments, places where input comes at you in a slower, more predictable way, allow other pathways to dominate, the reflective ones, the creative ones, the regulating ones. Those finally get to breathe. And when they breathe, they strengthen. And when they strengthen, they're more likely to survive pruning. This is how place changes mind. It's not mystical, it's mechanical. So when you notice I think more clearly in this room, or I feel more myself around these people, believe that. That's not you being picky. That's your nervous system telling you, in this context, I am allowed to reinforce the wiring you actually want to keep. Let's bring this back to something simple and grounding. Your brain is not trying to overwhelm you. It's trying to help you adapt. It overbuilds when you're in a phase of intake. It trims when you're in a phase of refinement. It strengthens what you rely on. It updates you. And yes, sometimes that updating feels like loss. That's worth saying out loud. Because pruning doesn't only clear out noise. Sometimes it clears out things you loved. Maybe you once spoke a language fluently, and now can barely remember basic words. Maybe you used to play an instrument, and now your fingers don't know where to go. Maybe you had a version of yourself that lived in a certain hobby or community or identity, and you don't feel connected to it anymore. There can be grief in that. There can be a quiet ache in realizing, that was me that mattered. And now it's slipping. That too is pruning. And it's okay to feel that loss. Letting a pathway go doesn't mean it was meaningless. It just means your current life hasn't been feeding it enough to keep it strong. Your brain chose to give that energy to something else you're surviving on now. You're allowed to mourn what you've outgrown, even if you outgrew it on purpose. But here is a softer truth to hold alongside that grief. Pathways are not gone. Gone. They're dimmed. They're overgrown. They're less accessible. But many can be brought back with renewed practice. If you return attention to something with care, a language, a skill, a way of thinking, the brain can re-strengthen it. It may take effort. It may feel clumsy, but it's not starting from zero. You're uncovering an old trail, The forest has grown in, but the ground still remembers the weight of your steps. And that means you are never fully too late. You are never fixed in stone. You are, at every age, editable. That's what synaptic pruning really is. Ongoing edit. Which brings us here, to this moment. You lying back or curled up or sitting quietly. Your mind drifting a little, your breathing easing out. Right now, without you lifting a finger, your brain is already doing the work, sorting, softening, flagging certain pathways as keep, letting others loosen. You don't have to micromanage that. You don't have to earn that. You just have to not drown it in constant noise. You are allowed to give yourself gentler inputs. You are allowed to create pockets of quiet. You are allowed to rehearse the person you want to be instead of arguing with the person you were. Your biology is listening. It's ready to keep what you repeat. So let's talk about clearing space. Because that's what this all comes down to. Really, there is only so much bandwidth you get on any given day. Only so much focus. Only so much emotional fuel. Only so much quiet you can carve out of the noise. Most of us walk around believing that the answer is do more, learn more, hold more, remember more. But that's not how a biological system stays healthy. Your brain does not become sharper by hoarding. It becomes sharper by letting go. The same way a garden doesn't thrive by keeping every single branch and leaf from every single season. You remove what's draining light so something else can finally reach it. But here is the subtle thing we skip over. Pruning is not just about removing what is bad. This is where people get stuck. We think, it'll cut out toxic thoughts. It'll get rid of negative habits. It'll stop thinking about things that stress me out. That sounds nice, but it's not the full picture. Your brain doesn't only prune what hurts. It also prunes what's unused, even if it's beautiful. So if you're wondering, why do I feel like I've lost creativity? Or why don't I daydream like I used to? Or why is it harder to imagine possibilities than it used to be? It might not be because you're older, or colder, or more cynical. It might simply be that you haven't been feeding that pathway. And your brain, being the efficient, unsentimental creature it is, quietly started withdrawing support from that circuit. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because you stopped showing it that it was valuable now. That's how mental clutter sneaks in, not just from junk you don't want, but from the slow starvation of things you actually do want. Your task, then, is not just get rid of what's draining me. Your task is also protect what I want to keep. To your nervous system, protection equals repetition. Attention is nutrition. If you give something your full, kind attention, not frantic attention, not doom scrolling attention, but real attention. You are telling your brain, save this. This matters. Keep the doorway open. Let's get concrete for a moment. These are not steps. You don't have to treat them like homework. Think of them more like small conditions you can invite into your day. Conditions that tell your brain what deserves to stay. First, undivided minutes. Your brain is constantly being yanked between tabs. Most of your day is split. Attention. Half here, half there, quarter somewhere else. It's like watering 20 plants with a teaspoon and wondering why none of them are thriving. So choose one thing, and only one, to give undivided minutes to. It can be tiny. In fact, tiny is better. Read one page of a book with your phone in another room. Listen to one song without doing anything else during it. Step outside and actually look at something real for 60 seconds. A tree, a building outline against the sky, the way light falls on concrete. Let that be the only input for that minute. That sounds almost pointless on the surface. But neurologically, you're doing something huge. You're creating a clean channel. You're showing your brain this signal is not competing. You're building fidelity around that input. And fidelity, clarity, is what your brain will defend in pruning. Second, intentional off, switch moments. Most people's minds never get to neutral. Even breaks get filled. Scroll breaks, noise breaks, distraction breaks. The machine never idles. It just changes tab. The problem with that is simple. If your brain never experiences true downshift, it assumes constant activation is necessary. And if it assumes constant activation is necessary, It will prune in favor of constant activation, which means stillness will start to feel uncomfortable and agitation will start to feel normal. That's how so many people get trapped in "I can't relax unless I'm exhausted." Stillness feels itchy. Quiet feels wrong. Rest feels suspicious. That's not a personality flaw. That's conditioning. So try this. Don't force yourself to relax. Just practice not inputting for a short window, 2 minutes. Eyes open is fine. Sit, lie down, lean against the wall. Whatever is comfortable. No music, no scrolling, no talking, no narrating. Just exist. Let thoughts come and go without trying to finish them. Let your body drop just a little. This is not meditation in the strict sense. This is nervous system proof. Proof that nothing is happening does not equal we're in danger. Proof that idle is allowed. You're feeding safety to the part of your brain that's been told it has to constantly monitor. You repeat that enough, your baseline begins to move. Hyper, alert stops being default. Your system starts trimming the urgency pathways. You get that less static feeling. Not because the world got easier, but because your signal to noise ratio shifted. Gentle rerouting. Sometimes a mental loop won't let go because, to your brain, it still feels unfinished. You keep replaying an argument, you keep thinking about a mistake, you keep fast forwarding into worst case futures. You tell yourself stop thinking about it, but it just comes back around. Here's why. Stop thinking about it is not closure. Your cognitive system is trying to resolve an open file. If you just slam the laptop shut, it will reopen that file at the next opportunity. What helps is not suppressing the loop, but closing it softly, giving it a place to land so the circuit can stand down. That can look like this. You write down the thing that keeps looping, in 1 or 2 lines, not an essay, just enough for your brain to feel like it's stored somewhere. You say out loud quietly, "This is saved. I will return if I need to. I don't have to solve it right now." Then, and this matters, you move your body. Small movement, not big. Stretch your fingers, roll your shoulders, tilt your head slowly side to side. Let your eyes look at something farther away than the screen. Why the movement? Because you're signaling state change. You're teaching your nervous system, we are exiting that loop for now. That physical shift is a boundary marker. Without that marker, your brain thinks you're still in the same moment, and the loop stays hot. Do that enough times, and you're building a closed-tab pathway. Your brain will learn that it doesn't need to keep that file pinned to the front of your awareness. 24 divided by 7. That loop will start losing priority. And during pruning, circuits that don't keep getting urgent priority lose resources, they fade. That's not denial. That's load management. Fourth, protect one joy. Not all pruning is about stress and survival. Some of it is about color, texture spark. The things that make you feel like you in a way you can't fully explain to anyone else. Ask yourself an answer with your body, not with logic. What is one tiny thing that makes you feel quietly alive? Not the thing you think you should love, not the giant fix my life habit, not the 3-hour routine that you wish you had the discipline for. One tiny thing that, when you do it, something in you loosens. You hum a little inside. It could be sketching nonsense shapes, or rearranging a shelf, or learning the name of one plant, or standing under hot water longer than is strictly efficient, or reading 2 paragraphs of sci-fi, or making your space smell like something you actually like instead of whatever candle was on sale, or putting on a song from years ago and letting your face soften because you still remember who you were then, whatever that thing is. That's not extra. That's a neural signature. That's a circuit that says, this is me. If you don't feed that circuit, your brain will assume it's optional. And if it assumes it's optional, it will start trimming it back. Not out of cruelty, out of efficiency. And then, 6 months later, a year later, you wake up and say, I don't feel like myself anymore. And you can't quite explain why. This is why you protect one joy. You're not indulging. You're maintaining identity pathways. You are telling your own nervous system, this stays. This matters. This is part of who we are, and I want you to keep wiring for it. That message that message gets honored. Fifth, stop rehearsing what you don't want to make permanent. Be careful with what you repeat to yourself about yourself. I'm always like this. I can't handle anything. I'm bad at people. I'm lazy. I ruin things. I'm just anxious. You might think you're just venting. You might even think you're being honest. But from your brain's point of view, repetition is instruction. Every time you say, "This is who I am," you're telling your nervous system, "Stabilize this. Keep this. Make this easy to access." That doesn't mean you have to lie to yourself and say, "Imperfect and calm and radiant at all times." Your brain's not going to believe that anyway. Forced positivity rarely sticks because it doesn't match lived data, but you can shift the phrasing in a way that leaves room to rewire. Instead of "I'm a mess," try "I'm overloaded right now." Instead of "I can't handle this," instead of "I always blow it," try "That didn't go how I hoped, but I'm still in process." Notice what those tiny changes do. They don't erase accountability. They don't fake confidence. They just frame your current state as current, not permanent. That matters because permanence is what your pruning system protects. If you label something as absolute truth, your brain will try to hold it. If you label it as present tense, not final, your brain is allowed to adapt. And the whole point of pruning is adapting. Now, let's zoom back out. Your brain is constantly shaping itself around three questions. Whether you're aware of it or not, what keeps me safe? What keeps me efficient? What keeps me valued? Safe, efficient, valued. If a thought pattern answers those, it will be reinforced. If a behavior answers those, it will be reinforced. If a relationship answers those, it will be reinforced. And anything that consistently fails all three, that's what gets cut. So ask yourself gently, not as judgment, just as curiosity. What in your life is being fed as "this keeps me safe," even if it actually doesn't? Constant self-criticism sometimes masquerades as safety. If I attack myself first, no one else can hurt me. That feels like protection. Your brain logs it as protective. It keeps it. But over time, that self-criticism becomes the loudest voice you hear. And because it's loud, your brain assumes it's important. And because it's important, it survives pruning. And because it survives pruning, it becomes identity. That's how so many people end up genuinely believing, "This is just who I am," when really, it's just what got rehearsed as safety. But safety can be relearned, and efficiency can be redefined. And value, especially, can be reclaimed. Because the truth is, a lot of mental clutter is just updated value tagging, outdated alarms, old versions of this matters that never got reviewed. You can review them now. You can sit quietly, even for a minute, and ask, do I want this thought to be easy for me to think 5 years from now? If the answer is no, then you've identified something. You don't need to keep rehearsing. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to bury it. You just stop feeding it more time than it deserves. You let it visit without letting it unpack. That alone begins the UN. Prioritizing and prioritizing is the beginning of pruning. Here is the soft landing place for all of this. You do not have to fix your mind. Your mind is not broken. What you're feeling, the clutter, the noise, the fatigue, the overthinking, the emotional reactivity, the fading of certain parts of yourself, the way calm sometimes feels distant. All of that is explainable. All of that is mechanical. All of that is trainable. Your brain is not your enemy. Your brain is your archivist. It's keeping what it thinks you'll need again. It's letting go of what it thinks you're done with. It's trying to keep you alive with the least possible wasted energy. And you are allowed gently, steadily, patiently to participate in that process. Not with force, not with shame, not with "I should be better by now." With small signals, with quiet proof, with repeats, with little moments where you pick up one thought, one behavior, one pocket of calm, one small joy, and you say to your own nervous system, "This one stays." And when you say "this one stays," you're also saying, "and some of the rest can go." Letting go sounds dramatic, like you're supposed to delete half your life overnight. Cut people out. Throw everything away. Start fresh. Start over. Reinvent yourself in one bold gesture. But that's not how your brain works. Your brain is quieter than that. It edits in layers. It retires what isn't being used. It dims, slowly, what isn't being asked for. So instead of thinking, what do I get rid of forever? Try something softer. What can I stop feeding? Just a little. Because every source of mental clutter you feel right now, every overload, every simmering anxiety that never fully cools, it has a fuel line. Something is keeping it lit. Sometimes the fuel is obvious. Doom scrolling. Endless news. Arguing with people in your head who aren't even in the room. Opening the same message draft 10 times and never sending it, but also never closing it. Sometimes the fuel is sneaky. Old reminders you never turned off. Notifications from apps you don't even like. A drawer full of objects you should be using, quietly accusing you every time you look at them. The stack of unread things that makes you feel behind just by existing. And sometimes the fuel is emotional. A promise you made to a past version of yourself that you don't even agree with anymore, but you still feel guilty for not keeping. A story about who you have to be acceptable. You don't have to confront all of that in one sitting. You couldn't. You shouldn't. But you can start starving one flame. Here is how this looks in a living brain. When you repeatedly expose yourself to something, your brain assumes it's important, so it builds and maintains wiring around it. That's true for skills. But it's also true for stress. If you feed yourself an hour of high, adrenaline fear content every night before trying to sleep, your nervous system sees a pattern. Nighttime equals threat review. It doesn't matter that you're technically just scrolling. Your body keeps score in chemicals, not captions. So adrenaline, cortisol, muscle tension, shallow breathing, that becomes encoded as standard pre-sleep state. Your brain thinks it's helping. We stay on alert until we're too exhausted to keep watching. Got it. You'll wire that. You'll keep that. And then you tell yourself you're just bad at sleeping. You've just rehearsed vigilance so consistently that your pruning system cleared space for it. That is adjustable. You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to throw your phone out a window. You don't have to pretend the world is gentle. If it doesn't feel gentle, you just have to interrupt the rehearsal. Even one night, even one pocket of time. If you carve out a little window, 10 minutes before you lie down, 5 if 10 feels impossible, where you refuse to feed yourself more threat, you're giving your brain a new data point. You're telling it nighttime doesn't always equal review. The disaster? Sometimes it equals softened shoulders, fuller breaths, slightly slower thoughts. It won't rewrite you in a day. It's not supposed to, but it will notice. And noticing is how rewiring begins. Your brain is very sensitive to patterns that repeat at the same time of day. That's how it predicts. That's how it prepares. If you can create even one consistent moment of quiet predictability, not perfection, just predictable quiet, your nervous system will start defending that routine. And when pruning cycles run, those calm-associated circuits will be flagged as keep. They become something your brain protects instead of something it treats as optional luxury. This is how safety becomes normal again. This is how noise stops winning by default. And then There's physical space. Your brain is always sampling the room you're in. People underestimate this. You think, I don't even notice my surroundings anymore. And in a conscious sense, maybe you don't. But your visual system is constantly mapping, labeling, tagging. It's asking, what here requires me? What here is unresolved? And every unresolved thing, every undone loop, every I still need to, becomes a tiny open tab, even if you're not actively thinking about it. Especially if you're not actively thinking about it. That's what drains you, not one giant stressor. 1,000 low-grade pings. A bag in the corner that you still haven't unpacked. A stack of mail you haven't sorted. A document you've been meaning to sign. A shirt you don't like, but you feel bad getting rid of because it's still fine. Half finished tasks, half made decisions, half closed loops. None of them are urgent individually, but collectively they create cognitive drag. You're burning energy just carrying them. Your brain does something really interesting here. When your environment is full of unresolved cues, your attention system stays in scanning mode. You'll notice you feel tired but wired. You're not doing anything huge, but you can't drop fully either. You hover. And when you hover like that for long enough, your brain adjusts its internal budget. It starts transferring support away from deep, focused pathways, because it sees you almost never get uninterrupted depth anyway, and it reallocates towards shallow, jumpy monitoring pathways. Congratulations, you've now trained yourself to be distractible. Not because you're weak, because you've been living inside a context that told your brain, this is the skill we need most. Track everything at once. I can't concentrate like I used to. That might not be aging. That might not be attention span decay. That might be environmental signaling. And the beautiful thing about signaling is, you can send a different one, not by becoming minimalist overnight, not by turning your home into a bare white box with one chair and a single plant and a glass of water that has a name. Number, by closing one loop at a time. Pick one small, unresolved visual cue in your space and resolve it all the way. One, fully. That's important. Fully is what tells your brain this can exit active memory. Maybe it's just the bag by the door. You unpack it, you put everything where it belongs. You fold the bag or hang it, or toss it if you never use it. Done. No, it'll finish later. Finished. Finished. What you did there, neurologically, is you gave yourself back a little slice of bandwidth. You removed one background check on that signal. Your attention system can rest a fraction of a percent more. You do that again tomorrow with one other tiny thing. Now, you're stacking tiny percentages, and your brain will start to notice, oh, we are allowed to complete. We are allowed to reduce active load. That belief alone begins to prune anxiety pathways that were built on the idea we can't ever get ahead. This is why cleaning 1 square foot of a desk can make you feel calmer, even if the rest of the room is chaos. It's not the size. It's the presence of a proof zone. Your brain loves proof. Give it something it can point at and say, we did that. That is done. We own that outcome. You'll feel the drop in tension because it now has one less thread to monitor. You're literally decluttering the watch list in your nervous system. Let's talk about memory for a moment. To raise a quiet fear most people carry, but rarely say out loud, I'm scared of forgetting who I've been. We keep things, screenshots, voice note, messages, clothes, tabs, old conversations, old photos, saved drafts of things we never sent. Not always because we want them, but because we're afraid that if we let go, we'll lose access to that version of ourselves. We're not hoarding objects. We're hoarding states. Who was I when I wore this? Who was I when I loved this song? Who was I when I wrote that late message I never sent? We save to remember. We save to keep doors open. We save because grief is saying, that's over. I don't need that anymore. And grief is uncomfortable. But here's the secret your brain is trying to tell you. Softly, you don't actually remember yourself through objects. You remember yourself through the pathways you still use. That's why an old smell can make you cry. That's why one chord of a song can put you back in a summer you haven't thought about in 10 years. That's why you can hear your own younger voice in your head sometimes when you're tired. Memory is not a museum. It's alive. It reactivates when similar circuits fire. Which means you can let go of a thing without erasing the version of you that loved it. If that version of you is still relevant, your brain will bring them forward when it needs them. If that version of you is no longer needed, then releasing that artifact is actually an act of kindness. Because it tells your nervous system, you don't have to keep allocating energy to maintain access to a state that hurts me now. That's pruning. Pruning is permission to not carry every former life on your back. You are allowed to not be all of your past selves at once. You are allowed to not be in constant conversation with every regret. You are allowed to not keep opening the same wound just because it feels dramatic and honest. To raise a myth that healing means revisiting pain over and over and over until you finally process it. Sometimes, yes, sometimes feeling it fully is part of metabolizing it. But at a certain point, repetition stops being processing and starts being rehearsal. You're no longer digesting, you're recirculating. And whatever you recirculate becomes what you keep. So if you keep replaying how they hurt you, how you failed, how you embarrassed yourself, how you missed your chance, your brain will assume the story is critical, and it will protect it. It will strengthen the emotional charge. It will keep that pathway easily accessible. You will be able to trigger that pain in 1 second flat because you've trained your system that this pain is your identity. Not because you're broken, because you're consistent. So here's the gentle move. When a memory comes up that stings, instead of diving fully back into the scene like you're pressing play on a movie, try shifting your point of view just a few inches. Watch it like you're sitting in the theater, not like you're back in the moment. You're not erasing it. You're changing the angle. Why does that matter? Because experience, encoded from the inside, in it, it's happening, gets stored differently than experience observed from the outside. In witnessing it, that small change in perspective changes how strongly your body activates the stress response while you recall it. Less stress response equals less reinforcement of the painful circuit. You're not denying the memory. You're just refusing to feed the pathway that tells your nervous system we're still under attack. That refusal is pruning. We should talk about people too. Relational clutter is real. Most of us carry unspoken obligations that live rent-free in our nervous system. People whose moods you track silently like weather radar, and maybe none of those people are bad people. This isn't about villains. It's about load. Every time you run a conversation you haven't had yet. Every time you micromanage how you'll phrase something so they won't be upset. Every time you talk yourself down from telling the truth because it'll just become a whole thing. Your brain is doing work. That work costs energy. That energy has to come from somewhere. And if it's constantly being spent there, it's not being spent elsewhere. Which means somewhere else in you, focus, creativity, patience, sleep, self, trust, is being underfunded. You cannot endlessly bankroll everyone else's comfort using your own bandwidth and then act surprised that you feel depleted. That depletion is not mysterious. It's an accounting reality. And your brain notices. If one connection in your life constantly requires you to monitor, self-edit, soothe, anticipate, adjust, explain, apologize, absorb, and stabilize, your nervous system will classify that connection as high-priority threat management, which means it will actively maintain wiring for that person's patterns. Their reactions, their tells, their triggers, sometimes more diligently than it maintains wiring for your own needs. That's how you end up knowing exactly what will upset them, but not remembering what makes you feel okay. That's how you end up fluent in someone else's inner weather and illiterate in your own. If that felt uncomfortably accurate, you're not alone. Pruning in relationships doesn't always mean cutting someone out of your life. Sometimes it does, and that's valid. But often, especially in close relationships, pruning looks like this. I am no longer going to rehearse your reaction ahead of time. I will let you respond in real time, and I will let your reaction belong to you. That sentence, practiced, is one of the most loving forms of neural decluttering you can offer yourself. Because managing someone else's emotional state is like running heavy software in the background all day. You don't see it on the screen, but your battery is draining. When you stop doing that, gently, consistently, without guilt, shaming yourself when you slip, you free up astonishing amounts of cognitive and emotional capacity. Your nervous system no longer has to hold a full simulation of someone else, 24 divided by 7. It can return some of that processing power back to you. That's energy you can spend on noticing what you feel in real time, instead of only realizing it 3 hours later in the shower. That's energy you can spend on savoring something instead of scanning for the next explosion. That's energy you can spend on slowness. Slowness matters. We don't realize how violently we rush ourselves. Not just in action, but in thought. You can be lying down, physically still, and your mind is sprinting, planning, predicting, rehearsing, replaying, refreshing. Your brain thinks it's helping. It believes speed equals safety, and sometimes it did. Sometimes you had to move fast. Sometimes you had to read the room instantly. Sometimes you had to anticipate what was coming, because not anticipating was dangerous. But if that's not your current reality anymore, then that high speed scanning is now just habit, an old adaptation running in a new context. Old adaptations in new contexts are prime candidates for pruning. This is where you get to renegotiate with your own nervous system. You get to say, Thank you for keeping me safe when speed was necessary. I see why you built that. But we're not in that room anymore. You don't have to keep sprinting. Your body won't fully believe you at first. That's okay. You prove it over time by giving it real, lived moments where nothing bad happens when you slow down. You show it, we paused, and we did not get punished. That proof is what eventually lets your system retire hypervigilance as mandatory. And when something is no longer mandatory, pruning can begin. Here's the thread through everything we've talked about. Pruning is not punishment. Pruning is relief. You are not killing off parts of yourself. You are clearing interference so the parts you actually are can breathe. Think of it like tuning a radio. When too many stations are bleeding into each other, you don't throw out the radio. You don't say, this thing is useless. I can't hear anything clearly. What's wrong with me? You adjust the dial. You turn down the static. You get intentional about which signal you want to amplify. That's what you're doing when you give full attention to something that nourishes you. Even for 60 seconds, you're amplifying a signal. That's what you're doing when you close one loop in your physical space and let your eyes rest on an area that doesn't demand anything from you. You're reducing static. That's what you're doing when you stop rehearsing a version of yourself you don't want to keep being. You're telling the station broadcasting, I am stuck like this forever, that its contract is ending. That's what you're doing when you let go, gently, respectfully, of the responsibility to emotionally manage another adult. You're reclaiming wattage. You're taking your own channel off mute. And yes, it feels strange at first. Of course it does. Calm can feel boring when you're used to chaos. Spaciousness can feel wrong when you're used to being crowded internally. Clarity can feel naked when you're used to being armored in noise. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That means your nervous system is noticing the change. Let it notice. That's how it learns. Oh, this is also allowed. And once your brain knows something is allowed, it will start saving energy by making that state easier to reach. That's what wiring does. It makes access cheaper. This is why the first quiet moment sometimes feels uncomfortable, but the 10th one feels easier. This is why the first boundary makes you shake, but the 5th one feels like an exhale. This is why the first time you leave a message unanswered for an hour, you panic. But the 20th time you do it, you barely think about it. Repetition doesn't just build habit. Repetition tells your pruning system what to keep. So here is the soft core of all of this. The part you can carry with you when the day speeds back up. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too damaged to rewire. Your brain is plastic for life. It is pruning and strengthening, pruning and strengthening, pruning and strengthening. As long as you are breathing, that means you always have leverage, not control in the harsh sense. Not force, not fix it now. Leverage. You can tilt the process through what you feed, through what you starve, through what you repeat, through what you finally, mercifully, let rest. And the more you do that, not perfectly, just consistently enough to be felt, the more your inner world starts to feel less like a crowded attic and more like a home, not a showroom, not a museum. A home lived in, warm, with room to move, where the thoughts that stay are the ones that help, where the loops that drained you slowly lose their urgency, where the voice in your head gets a little less cruel and a little more like someone who is actually on your side, where, for once, your mind isn't just a place you manage, it's a place you can actually rest. To read something else that happens when you start clearing mental space. You start hearing yourself again, and at first, that's not always the comfort you think it's going to be. Because for a long time, the noise wasn't just overload. It was also camouflage. It covered things you didn't want to feel. It kept certain thoughts far enough away that you didn't have to sit with them for more than a few seconds at a time. You stayed busy, stimulated, interrupted, flooded, not by accident. Stillness feels beautiful in theory. In practice, it can feel like, oh, now I'm alone with the thing. The ache, the fear about the future, the grief that you've been postponing for years by telling yourself, I don't have time to fall apart. That's another reason so many of us cling to constant input. If I keep my mind crowded, then nothing too sharp can get all the way to the front. Get blocked, bounced. That pain that keeps trying to surface, it's not coming up to ruin you. It's coming up to leave. Emotions that never get felt don't just evaporate. Your body stores the unfinished ones, the suspended ones, the not now, not here, not safe ones. It tucks them into muscle tension, stomach tightness, jaw clench, shallow breath, headaches, digestive weirdness, sleep that looks like rest from the outside but doesn't actually restore you. It keeps them as pending. When you give yourself even a little bit of internal quiet, those pending signals see an opening. Now, can we come through now? And you feel it as a wave. Sometimes sadness, sometimes this heavy, wordless pressure behind the eyes that doesn't even have a story attached. Just an urge to finally let your body do what it tried to do back then, when it wasn't allowed. That can feel like you're getting worse. You're not getting worse. You're unclogging. And unclogging looks messy while it's happening. The important thing is what you tell yourself in that moment. If you say, why am I like this? I thought I was doing better. Your nervous system hears. Processing is not safe. Abort, repress harder. And those circuits stay active. They don't prune, because you just told your body the feeling is still dangerous. But if you can say, even quietly, even awkwardly, even if you don't fully believe it yet, okay, you're allowed. I'm here. You can finish now. You're doing something profound. You're letting an old loop complete. Completion is what tells the system, we can archive this. We don't need to keep it live. That's how emotional clutter leaves. Not by intellectually explaining it away, not by denying it ever mattered, but by finally letting your body run the release script it got interrupted from years ago. Tears are release. Shaking is release. Sighing is release. That deep, spontaneous exhale you didn't even know you were holding is release. Your brain keeps wiring that support those unfinished emotional alarms, because, from its perspective, the alarm is still active. Once the alarm finally sounds and winds down, the circuitry doesn't have to keep burning energy to maintain that constant half alert. And during deep sleep, when pruning ramps up and the brain starts deciding which emotional traces to keep urgent and which ones to soften, the things you've actually processed can finally be downgraded. They move out of immediate survival file and into context. Memory, story, they stop hijacking your whole day. Whether you meant to sign up for it or not, is this letting yourself feel small doses of something real so your brain can finally stop looping huge doses of it in the background. This is why you sometimes cry for no reason once you finally slow down. There's a reason. The reason is now we have the bandwidth. Let's talk about sleep for a moment, because sleep is where so much of this actually crystallizes. You've probably noticed that when you're overwhelmed, sleep doesn't always feel like sleep. Maybe you get hours, but you wake up feeling foggy and unrefreshed, like your mind never fully powered down. Or maybe you can't get down at all. Your body is exhausted, your eyelids are heavy, but the second you lie still, your thoughts start sprinting. People blame themselves for this. I'm just an insomniac. My brain hates me. I can't stop overthinking. What's actually happening, most of the time, is that sleep and your clutter are having a quiet tug of war. Your brain uses certain stages of sleep, especially deep slow, wave sleep and REM sleep, to do all the sorting, tagging, reorganizing, and pruning we've been talking about. It files memories. It breaks down emotional charge. It clears metabolic waste from neural tissue. It basically does overnight housekeeping. But here's the catch. If your nervous system still thinks you're in danger, it will not fully surrender you to deep housekeeping mode. It won't drop you into the slow, restorative states as easily. Instead, it keeps you hovering in lighter, more vigilant sleep, just in case. You'll sleep, technically, but you're sleeping with one boot on. That's not a flaw. That's survival logic. Your body is saying, we can't go off duty yet. We're still carrying 900 open loops. So when you wake up drained, it's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's a sign that your internal world hasn't felt safe enough to fully hand the controls to recovery mode. which means the rituals you do while you're awake that create even tiny pockets of safety aren't just self-care. They're strategic pre-sleep signals. When you dim stimulation at night, not perfectly, just a little. When you let your breath slow for 60 seconds and you don't yank it back up right away. When you allow one honest emotion through instead of flipping past it. You're not being dramatic. You're telling your system, we can afford to downshift tonight. Over time, your brain begins to trust that signal. And when it trusts that signal, it lets you go deeper. You prune more efficiently. And when you prune more efficiently, guess what? Tomorrow feels less like wading through wet cement. Sleep is not just rest. Sleep is neural editing. And editing is how you get your mind back. Now let's look forward a little. To raise a version of you haven't met yet, not the ideal you that productivity culture tries to sell you. Not the fantasy you that wakes up at 4 a.m. doing sun salutations on a mountain in silence while journaling about your empire. The you who is just less crowded. The you who doesn't need to rehearse every conversation 3 times before it happens. The you who doesn't feel that constant background panic hum. The you who can sit in a room doing nothing for 5 minutes and not feel immediately like you're failing. The you who can hear their own preferences in real time instead of discovering them only when resentment leaks out. That version of you isn't a different person. It's you, minus interference. And here's the quietly hopeful part. You don't build that version by force. You don't bully yourself into being calm. You don't hustle your way into softness. That's not how nervous systems work. You get there by subtraction. By cutting the fuel line to inputs that never actually nourish you. By finishing tiny loops so your mind doesn't have to babysit them. By letting one stored emotion drain so your body stops guarding it. By telling yourself kindly, I'm not running your reaction in advance anymore to someone you've been emotionally babysitting for years. By letting one pocket of your space become truly done, truly peaceful, so your eyes can land somewhere and not brace. That's rewiring. That's pruning. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It doesn't look impressive on the outside. Honestly, most of the time, no one will even notice what you're doing. But you will. You'll catch yourself halfway through an old spiral and realize you don't actually want to go all the way down this time. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you're bored of it. To raise this calm, surprising boredom. Oh, I know this loop, I've run it 100 times. I don't need to run it again. That is pruning at work. That is a pathway losing its grip. You'll notice one day that you didn't check their mood before checking in with yourself. That's huge. That is energy coming home. You'll notice a quiet pocket in your day where, before, anxiety would have rushed in to fill the space. And nothing rushes in. Terror is just air, neutral air. A normal moment. That is what mental spaciousness actually feels like. Not ecstasy. Just the absence of constant demand. And sometimes, and this is my favorite one, you'll laugh easily. Out loud, without rehearsal. Not polite. Not strategic. Not a social that's fun. A real crack in the surface where joy just slips through. That laugh is diagnostic. That laugh means circuits that were jammed have loosened, because lightness is not something you perform. Lightness is what leaks out of a nervous system that isn't bracing all the time. And you deserve to feel that, not once a year on vacation, not only when everything is handled, not only when you've earned it by being productive enough, kind enough, small enough. You deserve to feel that as part of your baseline, not constant happiness. That's not real, just unarmed. Just uncompressed. Just here. You will not wake up one morning and suddenly be decluttered. The point isn't to reach zero noise. Life will always introduce new inputs. People will still be complicated. The world will still be loud. There will still be days where you feel wrung out and heavy and over it. That doesn't mean you've failed or gone backwards. It just means you're alive, and today was a lot. The work isn't to create a life with no clutter. The work is to stay in relationship with yourself closely enough that clutter doesn't get to take full control without you noticing. To notice earlier, to respond sooner, to release smaller, to rest without apology. And every time you do that, every single time, you're teaching your brain, prioritize this. Keep this. This is me. And your brain listens. That's the quiet miracle of it. Your mind is not your enemy. Your mind is not something broken that you have to fix. Your mind is a living system that has been doing its best with everything you've given it, and everything you've been through, and everything you've asked it to hold. If it's cluttered, it's because it cared. If it's tense, it's because it tried. If it's tired, it's because it stayed up in the watchtower while you slept. And now, slowly, kindly, you get to tell it. You don't have to hold all of that forever. We can put some of it down now. We can let some of it go quiet. We can keep what keeps us and let the rest fade. And here's where something shifts in a way that most people don't expect. After a little while, not instantly, but sooner than you think, the quiet stops feeling scary. At first, stillness feels like exposure. You sit without distraction, and your body's like, we're just here with nothing. Are you sure? Is this a trap? Because for years, nothing happening didn't mean safety. Sometimes it meant waiting for the next impact. So of course it feels suspicious at first. But then you have a few calm minutes that don't turn into an attack. Then you have a soft night that doesn't snap. Then you take a breath and no one punishes you for it. Slowly your nervous system starts to realize, oh, rest is allowed now. And once it starts believing that, the whole interior chemistry changes. You recover faster after stress. You come back to baseline more easily. You stop living at a constant 8 out of 10 tension level and calling that normal. This is what regulation actually is. Not never stressed, not perfectly composed. Regulation is just the ability to come back down instead of staying stuck up there. And coming back down is what gives your brain permission to prune. Because your brain will not deconstruct anything while it thinks you're still in the middle of the fire. It will not free up energy if it believes you still need it to survive. It will not retire old hypervigilance if it thinks you still need to scan. So the goal is not be calm all the time. That's pressure. The goal is let me show my body, in many small ways, that there are now moments where we are safe enough that you can set some of these down. That's different. That's possible, and that's what opens the door to something deeper, identity. Because once the emergency layer starts to loosen, a very honest question surfaces, okay? If I'm not just managing everybody else's emotions, dodging what hurts, staying on alert, replaying old scenes, bracing for impact, then who am I actually? And that question can feel disorienting. Not bad, just unfamiliar. A lot of people don't realize how much of their internal wiring is made of defense, adaptation, and performance. I'm the responsible one sometimes really means I became hyper. Responsible because chaos scared me and someone had to hold it together. I'm easygoing sometimes means I learned not to express needs because needs got punished. I'm always there for people sometimes means it was safer to focus on everyone else than to acknowledge that I was lonely. You can build an entire personality around survival without even knowing you did it. And then one day, you start decluttering. You start removing inputs that keep you in nonstop reactivity. You stop letting certain people turn you into a constant crisis responder. You stop performing calm when you're not calm. You say one true no. And suddenly, who are you now? Here's the beautiful part. That question is the point. Because pruning is not just about deleting what drains you. It's also about revealing what's underneath once. The constant noise isn't running your life. That's why the process can feel both freeing and strangely sad. Intrigue is a kind of quiet grief in realizing how much of you was actually an adaptation. But that sadness isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. That sadness is proof you're finally seeing yourself clearly. And once you've seen yourself clearly, you have options. When you know, I've been the reliable one because I had to be, you get to ask, do I still have to be that 24 divided by 7? Or do I get to be reliable and also playful? Reliable and also unavailable sometimes? Reliable and also resting? When you know, I've been the peacekeeper because I was scared of conflict, you get to ask, do I want to keep doing that? Or do I want to start telling the truth even if it creates a ripple? When you know, I shrank myself because that kept me safe. You get to ask, am I still in danger? Or is it okay now to take up normal, human space? That's what mental decluttering is actually making room for, not just quiet, choice. The ability to act instead of just react. The ability to decide who you are now instead of replaying who you had to be then. And something else happens when you reach that place. Your future stops feeling like an emergency. I didn't say your future becomes crystal clear, perfectly planned, abundantly funded, emotionally flawless, and wrapped in gold light. That's marketing. That's not life, I said. It stops feeling like an emergency, meaning you don't feel like you have to solve all of it tonight. In order to feel okay, you don't feel like you're already behind on a life. You haven't even lived yet. You don't feel guilty for not having turned into your final form by now. Why? Because once your nervous system trusts that it gets regular pockets of safety, it stops demanding that you build permanent safety instantly. That pressure, fix everything right now, or else, is actually a panic response. It's not vision, it's fear. When that fear loosens, you get something that almost feels luxurious. Time. Time to figure things out. Time to try something gently instead of violently. Time to rest before the crash instead of after. Time to want what you actually want, without talking yourself out of it immediately, because it's not practical or productive or what everyone expects. That time is worth more than almost anything, because with time, you can experiment. And experimenting is how you grow on purpose, instead of just adapting by force. To raise another piece we need to say out loud, because it matters. Sometimes people hear all of this and think, so I just cut out everything, stressful, and protect my peace, and am cured. Remember, this isn't about hiding from life. Life will still hand you deadlines, people who let you down, unexpected bills, difficult conversations, fear, loss. We're not deleting humanity. We're not numb. This is about building a mind that can actually meet life as it comes without collapsing every single time. This is about building a baseline that isn't already burned out before anything even happens. This is about removing what is unnecessarily draining, so you have strength left for what is genuinely hard. Because real life does take energy. Honesty takes energy. Even joy takes energy. Real, embodied, laughing. Too, hard joy takes energy, and you can't offer energy you don't have. That's why this work is not selfish. It's actually the opposite. When you prune the noise that keeps your brain in survival, you get access to clearer attention, steadier emotion, warmer presence. You become more available to your own life. Which, by the way, often makes you a safer, more grounded presence for other people too. Not because you're overextending for them, but because you're not secretly drowning. People can feel the difference between "I'm here because I chose to be" and "I'm here because I can't tolerate the guilt if I'm not." One is nourishing, the other quietly eats both of you. And here's something soft I want you to keep. You are allowed to become easier for yourself. That's not laziness. That's intelligence. You're allowed to design a day that your nervous system can actually live in. You're allowed to talk to yourself in a voice that doesn't bruise. You're allowed to pause before you answer. You're allowed to not be 24 divided by 7 available to everybody who wants a piece of you. You're allowed to say, that conversation takes me somewhere I don't want to live anymore, and step out. You're allowed to feel what you feel without immediately filing a self-criticism report about it. You're allowed to go to bed when you're tired, instead of pushing yourself to the point of emotional numbness and calling that discipline. You're allowed to have one little corner of your inner world that is fully yours and completely quiet. Because here is the thing, your brain listens to how you treat you. If you treat yourself like a machine, it will stay armored. If you treat yourself like a problem, it will stay tense. If you treat yourself like a disappointment, it will keep the shame pathways strong, because clearly, those must still be relevant. But if you treat yourself like someone you're responsible for caring for, not fixing, caring for, your brain notices, your nervous system notices, your body notices, and little by little, it lets go. Old loops dim. Outdated defenses release. Thoughts that used to show up 40 times a day start showing up 10, then 3, then not at all. You move through the world with a little more room inside your rib cage. Not room, that's your mind, decluttered. Not silently livable. I want that, but I feel so far from that. I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to earn that space by suffering more. You don't have to hit rock bottom first. You don't have to prove you're worthy of relief. You don't have to wait until the perfect time. or until everyone else is okay, or until you've checked every box. You're allowed to start creating that space now, in tiny, imperfect, human ways, with whatever energy you actually have today. One loop closed, one tab cleared, one honest feeling allowed, one quiet pocket protected. That's how it starts. And once it starts, your brain, this unbelievably adaptive plastic, self-healing organ, will help you keep going. Because beneath the clutter, beneath the noise, beneath the constant survival mode, you are already wired for clarity. You are already wired for steadiness. You are already wired for peace. Not because you've earned it, but because your nervous system was never designed to live in emergency forever. It has always wanted to come home, and coming home isn't some dramatic cinematic moment where the music swells and you solve yourself. It's usually quiet. It's usually small. It's usually something that wouldn't impress anybody watching from the outside. Coming home can look like finally telling the truth in your own head. Yeah, that hurt me. Yeah, I'm tired. Yeah, I actually don't want to be the strong one right now. That honesty is not collapse. That honesty is alignment. Because so much of mental clutter comes from running two versions of reality at once. The one you feel and the one you're allowed to admit. That double layer life is exhausting. You're constantly translating, smoothing, minimizing, reframing, explaining away. Filtering yourself in real time. Pruning doesn't just cut behaviors. It cuts that split. It lets you live in one layer instead of two. And when you live in one layer, when what you feel and what you're willing to acknowledge finally match, your brain stops burning energy on suppressing. Suppression is expensive. Clarity is efficient. You wouldn't think telling yourself the truth is a nervous system repair technique, but it secretly is. Now, here's another piece of this process that quietly does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Something we haven't talked about yet, but matters more than people realize. Rest. Not just took a break. Not just sat down for a second. I mean rest that lets the brain physically do its cleanup work. Here's what most people don't know. Your brain actually clears and rewires when you're not actively forcing it to perform. Especially while you sleep. Real sleep. Not doom scrolling in bed half. Conscious. Not collapsing at 2:30 a.m. with your jaw clenched. Your brain runs maintenance. It consolidates what matters. Files the important. Lets go of the noise. It literally strengthens certain synapses and weakens others. That's pruning. That's organization. That's the mental declutter happening biologically. Think about that. While you sleep, your mind quietly asks, did we need that? Did that help? Did that hurt? Should we keep carrying this? It's not perfect. It doesn't fix your entire life overnight. But that is one of the windows where the clutter can loosen. One of the reasons you can wake up after a real night of rest and feel even 5% clearer, even if nothing outside you changed. And that's why exhaustion makes everything feel impossible. It's not just that you're tired. It's that your brain hasn't had enough time or permission to run the nightly clean up cycle. So everything just piles up. That's why after too many under-rested days in a row, even tiny tasks feel huge. Your thinking feels loud and sticky, and your emotions sit right at the surface. It's not weakness. It's backlog. So when you defend your rest, even a little, you're not being lazy. You're literally letting your brain process and release what it can. You're letting yourself integrate instead of just accumulate. That's also why those small, quiet, no-input pockets during the day are not negotiable luxury. They're support. They're structural. They create a little breathing room so you're not running at cognitive overflow all the time. It's like giving your mind a hallway light instead of forcing it to navigate in the dark at full sprint. And this is important. You don't have to feel relaxed for rest to count. A lot of people think, well, I took a break, but I still felt tense, so it didn't work. Number, if you stayed out of the chaos for 5 minutes, even if your shoulders were still up by your ears, it still helped. If you let your attention narrow to just one simple sensory thing, even if your heart rate was not yet settled, it still helped. If you did nothing, except not add more in, that still helped. Your nervous system learns from exposure. You're giving it repetition. You're saying, here, Here's a slice of quiet. Here is safety without cost. It'll start to absorb that, even if you don't feel it right away. Be patient with the lag. Your body will almost always take longer to believe you're safe than your mind does to decide you're safe. That's not failure. That's biology being careful. And in a way, that's kind of sweet. Your nervous system is cautious because it was trying to protect you. It just needs some time and some proof to realize it can stand down. That's what this whole decluttering process really is. Proving to your own system, in small, repeatable ways, that you don't have to carry everything anymore. And this is where people usually ask quietly, so when does it feel different? Like, really different. Not perfect, not blissful, just different. Different usually shows up in these almost boring ways. You notice to raise a pause before you react. And in that pause, you actually have a choice. Even half a second of do I want to respond like that? That's huge. That means the loop that used to fire instantly is already weakening. You realize you're not rehearsing old arguments in your head every spare minute. The courtroom in your mind goes a little quieter. You don't feel compelled to replay and rewrite every conversation to prove you were right, or to save yourself from blame that isn't even coming. You just let it go because you're tired of carrying it. That's pruning. You feel tired, and instead of calling yourself dramatic, you just say, I'm tired, and you rest. No speech, no shame, no negotiation. Just a basic human need being met without self-attack. That's nervous system safety. You get less hooked by certain people. The ones who used to pull you into hours of overthinking. Their gravity weakens. You still notice them. You still feel the old pull. But it doesn't hijack your entire day anymore. That is what it looks like when your brain stops paying attention to signals that only drain you. You laugh. Not polite laughter. Not performance laughter. Not haha. Yeah, totally. Like real. Involuntary. I did not plan to smile this hard laughter. And for a second, you feel light. That's not random. That's what it feels like when just for a moment you're not bracing. And maybe the most powerful one, you stop apologizing for needing what you need. That alone changes everything. Because so much self-erasure is driven by the fear that if I show up as I am, it'll be rejected, abandoned, or punished. When that fear loosens, even slightly, you get more honest. You set cleaner boundaries. You ask for help sooner, not after collapse. You tell people, I don't have it in me today, without 4 paragraphs of justification. And from that point forward, your life stops being an unpredictable emergency and becomes something else, a place you're allowed to live in. This does not mean you become untouchable. You will still get overwhelmed sometimes. You will still get triggered sometimes. You will still wake up some mornings and feel the old heaviness sitting on your chest for no obvious reason. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're back at zero. That just means you're a person. Clarity does not mean nothing hurts. Clarity means when it hurts, you know why, and you know what to do with it instead of letting it swallow you whole. Cutting inputs that keep you in panic, letting the nervous system stand down, allowing true rest, softening self, judgment, letting certain identities loosen, letting space back in. This is not just mental health, it's architectural. You are literally rebuilding the interior of your own mind. You're making it somewhere you can stay. You deserve to live in a mind that is not punishing you for being alive. It's strange how radical that sounds, isn't it? That I deserve not to be at war with myself feels like a breakthrough. But it is, and it's one you are allowed to keep. So here is what I want you to hold, gently, as you settle into whatever comes next tonight. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not broken in a way other people aren't. What you've called broken is often adaptation. What you've called overreacting is often protection. What you've called lazy is often depletion. What you've called cold is often self-preservation. What you've called clingy is often a nervous system asking, are you going to leave like everyone else? When you understand that, compassion stops being this fluffy idea and starts being structural. It becomes part of how you function. It becomes the tone of your inner world. And that tone, kinder, steadier, less punishing, that tone is what tells your brain, we're safe enough now. You can put some of this down, And when your brain believes that, it prunes. It lets go. It releases what no longer serves you. It stops feeding loops that only keep you in pain. It stops pouring energy into versions of you that only existed to survive. And what's left is you. The you that isn't built solely out of tension. The you that isn't constantly negotiating for permission to rest. The you that can feel something good without immediately scanning for the catch. The you that can want without apologizing. The you that can say no without a shaking voice. The you that doesn't need to earn basic care. That you is not imaginary. That you is not a fantasy self. That you is what's underneath the noise. And that's the point of all of this. Not to turn you into someone else. Not to make you better so you'll finally be acceptable. Not to optimize you like a project. Just to clear enough space that you can finally meet the person you've been this whole time. And once you meet that person, even briefly, even in flashes, something subtle shifts. You stop chasing becoming. You start practicing being, not performing your way into worth, not micromanaging every reaction, not trying to impress your own self, just to feel allowed to exist, just inhabiting, taking up space in your own body without apologizing to anyone, including the version of you that still thinks you're only valuable when you're useful. And that's where we talk about something most people skip, because it's not dramatic, it's not extreme, and it doesn't feel like a movie moment. Maintenance, not survival mode. Not emergency response. Maintenance. The quiet rhythms that keep the clutter from rebuilding. Because even after you clear space, life will try to fill it again. The world will still throw noise at you. Other people will still hand you their stress like it's a party favor. Old habits will still occasionally slip through the door wearing a new outfit and try to convince you they're just being helpful. That's normal. So you don't need one giant breakthrough every day. You need small, steady touch points that keep you connected to yourself. They don't look impressive, and no one's giving you a trophy for doing them, but they will absolutely hold you together. Things like checking in with your body before you say yes, literally pausing and asking, do I have the energy for this, or am I already past capacity? And if the answer is no, letting no be the boundary, not maybe if I rearrange my needs to accommodate you. That pause is maintenance. Letting yourself feel one thing all the way through, instead of stacking it under 3 more unresolved things. If you're sad, be sad, cleanly, for a moment. Don't immediately bury it under, I shouldn't feel this way or other people have it worse or find whatever ill. Just get over it. That layering is what causes buildup. Letting one feeling breathe for a minute prevents 5 more from hardening around it. That presence is maintenance. Protecting little slices of no input time like they matter, because they do. 5 undistracted minutes is not laziness. It's not indulgence. It's clearing static before it becomes pressure. That silence is maintenance, saying the honest version, not the polite edit, at least to yourself. That drained me. That felt lonely. That scared me more than I admitted in the moment. Naming it unclogs it. Unnamed things become residue. That honesty is maintenance, letting your body complete stress cycles, noticing tension, and actually moving it out instead of just locking it in. Shake out your hands, unclench your jaw, stretch in the middle of the day, not just at 10 p.m. when you're already wrecked. Go for a messy little walk with no goal. Exhale on purpose. You're letting biology do biology. That releases maintenance. And resting before collapse, not after it. That one alone can change your entire baseline over time. Because most people only let themselves rest once they're shaking, sick, or on the verge of shutting down completely. That teaches your nervous system. We only get care in emergency. When you rest, while you're only at 60%, you send a totally different message. Care is allowed early. Care is normal. Care is our baseline, not our reward. That timing is maintenance. None of those things are huge. None fix you forever. But together, they keep the clutter from accumulating. They keep you from drifting back into a life where you're only reacting and never inhabiting. They keep the room in your mind from filling back up with boxes you didn't even choose. And that's important, because here's a quiet truth. Your system will try to pull you back to whatever felt familiar, even if familiar wasn't good. If chaos was normal, calm might feel wrong at first. If self-blame was normal, self-compassion might feel suspicious. If overperforming for love was normal, being cared for without working for it might feel unfair. Do not mistake unfamiliar for unsafe. Sometimes peace feels uncomfortable, not because it's bad, but because you're not used to being allowed to have it. That discomfort is not a red flag. It's a recalibration. Stay with it. Let your body learn that nothing bad happens when you're not bracing. Let your mind learn that you don't get punished for being truthful. Let your nervous system learn that it doesn't have to keep you at high alert just to keep you included. This is where the deeper healing sneaks in. When safety stops feeling like a rare event and starts feeling like your default setting. And yes, you are allowed to have that. Even if no one modeled it for you. Even if you've spent most of your life negotiating to earn scraps of it, you're allowed to build safety from scratch and then keep it. You're allowed to build a mind that's kind to you. You're allowed to build a life that doesn't constantly require you to prove you deserve to exist in it. It doesn't mean you'll never have a loud day again. You will. Life is still life. People will still be people. Nervous systems will still nervous system. But here's the difference. Before, the loud days owned you. They defined you. They swallowed the whole week. Now, a loud day is just a loud day. It doesn't become your identity. It doesn't erase your progress. It doesn't mean you're back where you started. It just means, okay, today is heavier. I know what to do with heavy days now. That I know what to do feeling. That's the gold. That's capacity. That's resilience without self. Erasure. That's self. Trust. And self-trust. More than positivity, more than discipline, more than never struggle again, is what actually makes you feel safe inside your own head. Because once you trust yourself, clutter loses power. It can still show up, but it can't run you. You look at it and go, I see you. I know what you are. I know where you come from. I know what you try to make me believe. I know how to sit with you without letting you steer. That is a completely different way of being alive. That's not constant firefighting. That's stewardship. And from that place, something beautiful happens that almost feels like a miracle when you notice it. Because it's so gentle you could miss it if you're not paying attention. You start to want things again. Not in the panicked way. If I don't get this, it'll fall apart. Not in the survival way. I need this to prove I'm enough. In a quiet, honest way, I want more ease in my mornings. I want to feel close to someone without being scared of it the whole time. I want to create something that feels like me. I want to wake up and not dread my own thoughts. Desire without desperation. Desire without self. Abandonment. Desire without apology. That's what grows in cleared space. It's not just that stress goes down. It's that capacity for joy goes up. And joy here doesn't mean fireworks and confetti. Joy can be microscopic. Joy can be my shoulders dropped for the first time all day. Joy can be I laughed and didn't immediately feel guilty for feeling okay. Joy can be I was present for one real moment of my actual life. That is not lightweight. That is not trivial. And maybe no one ever said this to you out loud. So I will. You are allowed to build a life that is gentle on your mind. Not because you earned it, not because you fixed yourself, not because you became endlessly productive and perfectly regulated. Just because you are here and you are human, and being alive is already hard enough. Let it be gentler, where you can make it gentler. Let it be quieter, where you can make it quiet. Let it be kinder, where you can make it kinder. Protect the parts of you that finally feel like home. That's not selfish. That's not weak. That's not letting yourself go. That's you taking your mind back. And when you take your mind back, something else happens that no one warns you about. And it's quietly, profoundly life-altering. You stop needing to be impressive to be allowed to rest. You stop running performance audits on yourself every night before bed. You stop replaying every conversation to make sure you were acceptable enough to keep your spot in people's lives. You start letting yourself just exist, not as a project, not as a brand, not as a redemption arc, as a person in progress, sure, but also a person who is already allowed to feel okay before the story is finished, because hair is a truth you're allowed to keep. Healing is not something you graduate from. There is no ceremony. There is no final exam. There is no version of you in the future, standing on a stage with a ribbon, being handed a certificate that says no longer human. You will still get overwhelmed sometimes. You will still get flooded sometimes. You will still have days where you shut down, or numb out, or snap faster than you meant to. That does not erase the work you've done. That does not reset you to zero. That does not mean you're broken again. It just means you have a nervous system and it got loud today. That's all. You knowing that and not spiraling about it is part of the healing. You saying, it's loud right now. I'm going to lower the input, drink water, and not make any forever. Decisions until my body comes back online is part of the healing. You're stepping away from a fight instead of proving your point while dysregulated is part of the healing. You're noticing? Oh, this feeling isn't actually about this moment. It's an older file that got reopened, and giving yourself compassion instead of punishment. That's part of the healing. What used to become a 3-day collapse might now be a 40-minute wave you can ride without drowning. That is not nothing. That is not bare minimum. That is evidence. You are building stability, not the fake kind where you're frozen and numb and technically holding it together, but the living kind, the kind that flexes and moves and lets you be complicated without falling apart. And that kind of stability does not come from forcing yourself to be tougher. It comes from creating conditions where you don't have to be in survival mode all the time. Less assault on your senses, less constant self-critique, less pretending you're fine until you're shaking. More pause, more honesty, more softness. Softness is not the opposite of strength. Softness is what lets strength stop being an emergency posture, and the more you live there, in that quieter range, in that self-trusting place, the more something else becomes available to you. Direction. Not obligation. Not pressure. Direction. When your mind is jammed full of noise, you don't just feel stressed. You can't tell what's you and what's expectation. You can't tell what you actually want and what you're doing, just because you've always done it and you're scared to set it down. But after you clear some of that mental clutter, after you prune the inputs that keep you running scared, after you stop feeding energy to thoughts that only exist to drain you, you start to hear something underneath all of it. Desire with clarity. It sounds like, this matters to me. I don't want to carry that anymore. I'm not spending one more year apologizing for needing rest. I want to build a life I don't have to constantly escape from. That is the voice that was buried. That is you, not the anxious narrator, not the survival persona. You, the you that existed before the noise, or maybe the you that formed inside the noise and learned how to keep a tiny pilot light going anyway. That voice is the one worth listening to. Not every fear, not every intrusive spiral, not every guilt. Script, the steady one that doesn't yell. And the more you make space for that voice, the easier decisions become. Do I really want to see this person tonight? Or am I scared they'll be mad if I say no? Do I actually still care about this goal? Or am I only chasing it because I said I would 3 years ago and I don't know how to stop? Does this version of success even feel good in my body? Or does it just look good from a distance? That kind of clarity is what turns your life from reactive to intentional. That's the point of clearing mental clutter, not to empty your mind forever, not to live in permanent Zen silence on top of a mountain, glowing and untouchable. It's so you can finally hear yourself. Because once you can hear yourself, you can guide yourself. And once you can guide yourself, you're not at the mercy of every demand, every mood in the room, every old wound. Turi is an anchor. Turi is a place inside you that feels like home base, and you can return to it. You are allowed to build that. You are allowed to keep it. You are allowed to protect it, even from people who don't understand why you need it. Especially from people who don't understand why you need it. That is not cruelty. That is boundary. Boundary is just another word for I am not abandoning myself to keep you comfortable. That, too, is part of healing. And here's the last thing to hold close. You do not have to earn a quieter mind by suffering first. You don't have to hit rock bottom to qualify for ease. You don't have to prove you're productive enough, patient enough, grateful enough, spiritual enough, healed enough. You are allowed to start giving yourself nervous system level kindness now. Exactly as you are, exactly in the state you're in. Not because you deserve it, because you are a living organism. And living organisms need regulation, space, warmth, and repair. You are allowed to choose calm when chaos is available. You are allowed to choose rest when burnout is available. You are allowed to choose self-honesty when self-judgment is available. You are allowed to choose softness when self-erasure is available. You are allowed to choose you, not just in theory, but in what you actually feed your mind every day. And if that still feels new, or guilty, or a little wrong, that's okay. New safety almost always feels suspicious at first. Let it feel weird. Let it feel different. Let it feel tender and awkward and almost too gentle to trust. Keep going anyway. Because this slow clearing, this steady pruning, this quiet returning to yourself, this is not you becoming someone else. This is you finally becoming allowed.